Joseph with Landscape King, the Landscape King podcast. Here we are again. If you don't know who we are a landscape company in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We started in 2017, and we've started this podcast to help educate people about landscaping. We will talk about business from time to time, but we're just sharing what we've learned, what works for us. And here we go. Today's episode, the top 10 warm season perennials for Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So let's talk about perennials and annuals. Perennials are plants that live for a season, die for a season, then come back, or go dormant, then come back. Annuals live for a season, die for a season, and that's it. That's the end of their life cycle. So today, the first plant we're going to talk about is number 1, plumbago. Plumbago, most of the time, will perennialize. Some people might call it an annual. It's really a tropical, but most of the time it does come back. Plumbago comes in a white flower, a blue flower. There may be some dwarf varieties, but I know most of them will get at least 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. Really great for that color section of the front of a flower bed, especially in areas like at entrances to restaurants, entrances to neighborhoods. Plumbago would be used in the back side of that row where you maybe have some smaller annuals in front. Then you have that plumbago. It's the back row and in a planting like that. But I love the plumbago. The blue, the white, they're both beautiful. A lot of times they will come back. Depending on the winter, sometimes it may not. Number 2, lantana. Many different colors, many different sizes, many different varieties. The most common when you think about lantana is the yellow. The new gold is still one of my favorite ones. It just is aggressive grower. It can be too aggressive in the wrong spot, but it's great in the front of a flower bed, or same thing, maybe behind or in front of plumbago. It would be perfect. You've got the yellow and then the blue or the blue or the white, whatever that is. But the lantana is a great ground cover. It almost always comes back. And all of these, they're called perennials. Sometimes it just depends on your location of where you're at, and depends on how hard the freezes are. Lantana is almost guaranteed to come back every time. There are some purples, there are some oranges, there's even a reddish color as well, but the most common is the yellow, lantana. Now, lantana really does like full sun as well. It can handle a little bit of shade, but mostly it's going to be full sun, partial sun, partial shade. If it gets too much shade, it's not going to bloom as much. Same with the plumbago. They really like that full sun. Number 3, perennial salvia. So salvia, there is an annual salvia that doesn't really come back, and sometimes it'll drop seed and come back. But the perennial salvia comes back every year. The one that I think of the most is just that purple. There's several different colors, several different varieties as well, but most of them are going to be some shade of purple. There is a red salvia as well. Very nice behind a row of vinca or something in front of it as well. If you have a bedding plant area, you would have a few different heights. This would be on the back side. Number 4, Mexican heather. It's really a type of kufia. Another cool kufia is the bat face kufia, and it comes back every year as well. It gets much larger than the Mexican heather does, or the false heather. But the bat face kufia, if you take the flower off and look at it, it really does kind of look like a bat face. And I think cigar plant is also maybe a type of kufia. If it's not, it looks very similar, but same thing. There's a little flower that looks like almost like a little cigar. Number 5, variegated flaxseed. Now, we've talked about this one as being a very common plant, and I put this one on here not because it's a super beautiful flowering plant, but what's nice about this one is it has that loose structure to it, and then it's got white and green that just pops, especially in front of an all-green landscape with a lot of green hedges behind it. It looks great in a landscape, and I always incorporate it when I'm doing a little bedding plant area where I'm planting annuals and perennials. I incorporate that as well. Now, variegated flaxseed is one of those plants that if you look at it during the winter, it looks toast. It looks like it's not coming back at all, but it almost always comes back. Now, we have had some instances where it doesn't, but most of the time, it is going to perennialize. Number 6 is blue days. Now, a lot of people would call blue days an annual. We're going to call it kind of, sometimes I've seen it perennialize. And again, it depends on the location, depends on where it's at on the house or around the building, wherever it's at, what kind of wind it's getting. It depends on how hard the freezes are. But blue days is beautiful because it's a nice ground cover. It's got almost a silverish leaf to it, and then it's got a really nice blue flower. And there's not a lot of things that bloom blue, but the blue days, the plumbago, and we've talked about before, the agapanthus is almost that blue as well. But we use blue days a whole lot, and we'll also use it in front. Sometimes we'll do like blue days, the perennial salvia, the variegated flaxseed, and the plumbago, and use all of them in one planting, and gives you a really cool look, especially like at the entrance of a neighborhood, the entrance of a restaurant or a church or something like that. Number 7, foxtail fern. Again, this is one we've talked about before. It's in the same family as the asparagus fern, but the foxtail fern just looks, if you're not familiar with plants and you see this, it doesn't look like a real plant. It's a crazy looking, almost octopus, just real weird looking plant that just gives you such a cool texture in a landscape where you have a lot of dense shrubs, give you something loose. Now this dies back in the winter, but comes back every year consistently. The foxtail fern does really well. Number 8, Cuban gold duranta. Now, some people may call this a tropical or annual, but again, this is something, especially in my yard, my personal yard, this comes back for me every year. So Cuban gold duranta is really nice because it gives you that chartreuse, kind of yellowish green color. Maybe not chartreuse, but that bright pop that looks great in front of dark green shrubs as well. It's very similar color to the sunshine ligustrum that you see all over now as well. But the Cuban gold duranta, it does make little berries as well. It may make a little flower, but it's really used because of the foliage color. The Cuban gold duranta, like I said, it dies back in the winter, but it does come back every year. Number 9, Gomphrena. Gomphrena, there's all different kinds of varieties of this one too, but the most common one is one that makes this little ball of purple-ish pink flowers. Really cool plant. Again, great. Really has a nice loose shape to it as well. The Gomphrena, I have some in my yard as well, and it's perennialized every year and it's come back. Sometimes with all of these, depending on how hard the freezes are here in Baton Rouge, they may or may not come back, but most of the time they come back consistently. Number 10, this is one that we want to use more of that I just forget about, but it's coneflowers or echinacea, and they have many different colors, many different varieties, and most of the time they're going to perennialize as well. So right now, these are our 10 most common perennials in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But what we introduced to you last week was that we're going to start having a plant of the week. The first plant of the week was the Distilleum, which we have cinnamon girl, swing low, vintage jade, linebacker, all these different sizes, all these different shapes as well. And then last week, or this week right now, the plant of the week is the knockout and drift rose. So coming up, when this episode drops, we'll have a new plant of the week for you that you'll just have to keep on tuning in on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube to find out what it is. But keep following us for our plant of the week. The drift rose is one of our favorites to give you a plant that continues to bloom spring through fall. It's a low growing, 2 to 3 feet wide, really 1 to 2 to 3 feet wide. Comes in pink, comes in white, comes in red. Now, it does require maintenance. It does require pruning. It is not completely low maintenance, but it's lower maintenance than the Floribundas, the grandifloras, the hybrid teas, in the sense that it blooms on new growth. But we prune them at least 4 to 6 times a year. But great plant for giving you something that gives you a lot of color. And the same with the knockouts. The knockouts are going to get like 4 to 6 feet tall, 4 to 6 feet wide. They say 4 to 5, but I've seen them get big. Again, we want we're going to want to prune those regularly as well. So knockouts, drift roses, that's our plant of the week. Keep tuning in. We'll have a new one for you. If you got questions, if you want to know anything, somebody left a comment about knowing more about native plants. We'll talk about that as well. If you got questions, just send us a message. We'd love to talk about whatever you're interested in, as long as it pertains to plants. So Joseph with Landscape King, let's plant some plants.